I see Commissioner Fielder is on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Commissioner O'Donnell, are you on?
Indeed.
Very good. Good morning, everybody. The time is now 9:30 a.m. Today's date is January 11th, 2022. Happy New Year to everybody. This is the time and place for our regularly scheduled business meeting. Would the other commissioners please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, commissioners. I would note for the record that we have quorum this morning. Commissioner Pinocci, myself, and Vice Chair Johnson are present in the Bollinger Room, and Commissioners O'Donnell and Fielder are attending online. So we do have quorum. This would be the time and place for public comment. Is there any public commenters in the room? Seeing none, are there any public commenters online? I'm being informed there are not. So, announcement to changes to the agenda. I would just note one minor technicality on our public agenda, that the action item for approval of the commission minutes should be for the week of December 28th, 2021, not December 13th. But other than that, there are no changes to the agenda this morning. So we'll move into action items. Action item number 1 is approval of the commission minutes for the week of December 28, 2021. Is there a motion?
To approve the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Pinocci. Discussion, changes to the agenda? Commission minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the vice chair's motion to approve the commission minutes for the week of December 28, 2021, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move into the work session portion of our meeting this morning. Work session item number 1 is docket 2020.09.094. This is commission initiated, commission investigation of Northstar to provide an update on the status of Northstar water and sewer. Mr. Fink will be handling this matter for the commission this morning.
Morning, Chair and Commissioners. Last week, Northstar submitted its December report, and in that report included its 2021 water data. Within that data, Northstar provided their customer usage measurements from their peak month of June, in addition with their non-peak month of November. In regard to the meter registry replacements, there appears to be good progress being made. There are currently a total of 60 malfunctioning meters, down from 120 in June. Tyler stuck with Rocky Mountain operators, and his crew continued to identify additional malfunctioning meters and get those ordered and replaced as they come in. Northstar also submitted a copy of its discontinuance notice utilizing Montana Admin Rule 38.5.2505 as its legal basis. Last but not least, Northstar includes a possible tariff change that would increase rates based on a tiered rate structure for excess usage. This is mostly to discourage waste of excess water, primarily during the summer months. With that being said, Northstar is hoping to have discussions with the parties about the appropriate water volume rate increase and other issues necessary to help resolve any other issues. That's all I have for you today, and I'm here for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Vice Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Fink. A couple of things. Can we receive some kind of assurance from Northstar that this whole meter/register thing is in fact going to be the replacement of defective meters going to be complete prior to the onset of the irrigation system season, in 2022?
Chair Brown, Vice Chair Johnson, I believe they have said in the past their intent was to get all meters replaced by the end of March, which would be before the watering season. But we can definitely request that in the next report.
Well, I don't want to be unreasonable, and it seems to me that there's some good faith effort being made here to finally address these issues that we've been trying to deal with for so long. But I also think it's important that we have some hard and fast assurances from them, and that they understand that we absolutely expect them to have this system ready to go, and the underlying changes in tariff and policy done, T's crossed, I's dotted, before we get to that point. I would think maybe I'm going beyond what we can do with this assertion, but if we go into another irrigating season with these kinds of issues still out there, I think the commission is going to be well within its regulatory authority to expect some very real accountability from the utility for not having met these expectations that I think we now have made very clear. So I just want that communicated to them in no uncertain terms.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson. Commissioner Fielder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I appreciate the questions that our legal counsel posed to the company's legal counsel and the summary of the responses. There was a couple of things in there that still left a lot of gray area, I think. And one was this location of the meters being inside the home, and the question whether or not somebody could be using water for outside purposes, irrigation purposes, if they, if they wanted to. And the answer was their answer was muddled, I would say. It says there's no proper means for a customer to tap into that line, but if they had plumbing skills, they could. And so I think the answer doesn't get to the heart of the matter, and that is whether or not the utility can confirm whether people are, whether water is being drawn out that's not going through the meters, whether water is being drawn out before it gets to the meter in the home. And I think that if we don't address that, and the utility does not address that, then we're going to be facing uncertainty again in terms of how much water people can use and how quickly that system's going to be depleted during the peak of summer watering season. So I think the answer is a little bit vague and isn't going to the point. And the point being that we need to make sure that the utility is able to account for the water that's being used so that they can adequately supply it to all the customers. So that was one issue that I think I'd like our staff to drill down on. And then the other one was, I guess we'll get to this during tariff review, but a comment from the water operator that they suggested that the rates be set to discourage people from using too much water. And I just found that to be inconsistent with the principle of, these utilities charging to recover costs and recoup a fair profit. So that was another point that I don't know if now would be an appropriate time to have staff, discuss that with them, or if we want to wait till tariff comes forward on it. But those were two red flags I saw in this latest report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Field. And Mr. Fink, did you want to respond to that in any way?
Chair Brown. Commissioner Fielder, I can respond a little bit in regards to the water usage. Their 2021 data that they provided to us, I think that'll give the utility and Northstar and the commission good data when, as they keep replacing these meters, they have their total water being pumped into the distribution tanks, and then those total gallons that are being distributed by the customers. There really isn't any room for a customer to then, if they are tapping into the water, the utility is going to know that there's going to be an excess water being removed from the system. With that being said, there is a 10% leakage factor, which is pretty common with utilities, according to Tyler Stuck with Rocky Mountain Operator. But once they do have all those meters replaced and they can figure out the total usage with each customer, it will give them a better understanding if anybody's tapping into it, which they do plan on addressing as we progress forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. I was a little bit concerned, I guess, or confused at some of the answers in Mr. Struck's testimony there, or written testimony or report, that he seemed to imply that the problem with the water delivery system had to do solely with the breakdown of the pump in July of last year. It didn't seem to address that the problems from this association have been happening with some annual regularity. And it didn't seem to be addressing that overall issue. And I'm concerned with whether or not the solution to this will actually take care of those needs. In talking about the number of meters that are not functioning properly, and and the fact that the pump was broken, the backup pump was insufficient. It just seems to me that this utility had been astoundingly poorly managed historically. I'm not saying that as an assertion. It just seems like an impression that I have. And it concerns me that Mr. Struck's information right here just seems to lay everything at the feet of one particular instance and not a continuing problem. So I would want to make sure that staff is looking at the entirety of the problem, not just one particular situation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Finogi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To get directly to Tony's point, did they get the extra pumps bought where they're on hand and in storage. In the event a pump breaks down, they have one to grab off the shelf. Do we know if they're at that point?
Chair Brown, Commissioner Pinochi, they did install their backup pump, and then they did have one on order that was coming in case their current pump was out, as far as my recollection.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
They have more than one pump. I believe there's several in the system, and I would like to find out if they have a spare pump for every pump. That way they can grab one from the shelf, and at that point they order another one. An issue that can come up is, let's say a pump is on the shelf for 2 years before they need it. When they go to use it, it may be void of warranty. So they have to get kind of permission from where they order it to say, hey, the warranty doesn't start until the pump's installed. That's a problem I've had experience with in the past. Another good point for the commissioners here to realize, and I'm not picking on Northwest the water provider here. How many water meters failed? Do I understand it was over 120?
Chair Brown, Commissioner Pinochi, there was numerous water meters, probably in excess of 120, that it was a batch that they had bought, and they all are failing simultaneously throughout the year.
This is important for everyone in the room to understand. In my experience, the old analog water meter, and that's one that you could not read standing out 100 yards away from the meter. The old analog meter, you had to physically go up, look at, and write notes. I've never seen a failure. So as our customers start to get these new smart meters, for them not to trust them, there's a very good reason. Because many of them, not only in the water industry, but the electric industry, we're seeing tremendous problems, which could be a growing pain moving to these new smart meters. But I just want everyone to understand, if a ratepayer comes in and says, I just don't trust it, they have plenty of good reason to have that attitude towards their new smart meter. I never seen a leak in the old analog meter when we went to install them. I have reports of the new smart meters flooding the basement because the connection's failing. It's not just failing on the ability to read accurately, it's failing on leaking. And now the water boards are responsible for water damage. I'm in the middle of an argument that the persons that installed the water meters are at fault for the flooding and not the water meter. But with the old analog meter, I just never experienced any of these problems. Okay. Smart meters, electrical wise, are burning homes down. Of course, they say we've got that problem taken care of, but I just want everyone to understand, I've never seen 120 meters fail in my life working with water and sewer associations. So for people to be concerned about the new smart meters is a very good reason. And it's just interesting for us to see this example. And I would challenge any public service commissioner to tell me an analog meter, they had 120 failures in one district or one water group in the history of the Public Service Commission. If it happened, I never heard of it. So it's just interesting to keep a note on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinochi. Additional discussion? Mr. Fink, I would just note that having read through Northstar's latest filings, if you will, that they are requesting that we as a commission consider a water volume rate increase at some point, but I would echo the vice chair's comments that we're not anywhere near considering that unless and until we get this water meter issue addressed and all the registers are installed. And I share the vice chair's concerns that the pace at which this is proceeding is going to be problematic, not only for the utility, but for the commission. So I would encourage staff to encourage utility to pick up the pace, perhaps. Mr. Fink.
Chair Brown, Northstar was, they were wanting the other parties to weigh in on their informal proposal for that. So they were hoping to get that moving along quickly.
Quickly is the word for everything here, I think. Additional discussion? Vice Chair Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, I want to, having been maybe a little negative in my comments, I want to express to staff my appreciation for their diligence in pursuing these issues. And I really do appreciate it. And I think that if you all continue along that road, there's every reason to believe that we can see this to a successful outcome. But let's not take our eye off the ball this time. And I'm talking about us, all of us here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Mr. Fink. All right, let's move to work session item number 2. This is commission initiated. This is Blue Book delegation of authority to consider adopting a new commission policy in the Blue Book regarding authority delegated by the commissioners to staff. Mr. Reed.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is the first of the new policies that the drafting committee would set before you. It's relatively self-explanatory. The goal, as is expressed in the document itself, is to make the most efficient and effective use of both commission and staff time. It formalizes most of the practice that we currently observe, which is that staff engage in ministerial processes like scheduling without bothering, I'll say, the commission overmuch with the gory details as each docket proceeds through its paces. It's primarily procedural in nature. There's almost nothing in here that's substantive, which is to say, this policy is the means by which the staff effects the will of the commission. I would note that the primary area on which I would expect to have questions is in 6B and C of this policy, which is the portion in which the commission and individual commissioners can act as a check or editors of documents that staff has produced. Again, it largely recapitulates what's actually practiced in the commission. And I would defer to commission members for any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Commissioner Fielder? Commissioner Fielder? Commissioner Fielder, can you hear us? Did we lose Commissioner Fielder? All right. Commissioner O'Donnell, can you still hear us?
Yes, sir.
All right, let me try Commissioner Fielder one more time. Commissioner Fielder? All right, Vice Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent job on this, Mr. Reed and team. I appreciate that. I just had a couple of really very minor things, kind of picking nits, I guess. But one, we go into some detail with regard to how we're going to utilize electronic signatures on orders from this commission. I wonder whether it's through footnote or whatever, there should not be some commentary with regard to our moving almost completely away from the longstanding tradition of physical signatures and signature stamps, just by way of kind of completing the record as we move from one stage to another. Leave that completely up to y'all. But it was just one thing that that occurred to me as I was reading this. And the other thing is really minor, but we might as well address it under 5 uncontested matters, section B, and then subsection II. The last sentence, said objection must be made, and it says with ing to, that G needs to come out of there, and then we'll be in good shape. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let me see if Commissioner
Mr. Chairman,
Fielder.
I'm back on the line.
Okay, very good, Commissioner Fielder.
Yeah.
You have the
Curious,
floor.
my call dropped at that moment. But, okay, has a motion been made, Mr. Chairman?
It has not.
Okay, I will go ahead and move the adoption of the delegation of authority policy to replace all other references to delegation of authority in the current Blue Book.
Very good. Is there a second? I'll second. Discussion, Commissioner Fielder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the Vice Chair's eagle eye on editing is noted, and I would expect that this policy and the others would be subject to clerical adjustments, non-substantive adjustments. This is basically a prototype. As you see this policy format, I want to just give a little background here. Let me back up. Last summer, when the chair appointed a Blue Book review policy, one of the first things we did was we determined that we wanted the Blue Book to be clear and concise and easy to follow. And so committee determined that better organization would be helpful. And this template format was adopted by the committee to use this for each of the policy topics that the Blue Book will eventually address or does currently address. And to that end, the committee determined that a comprehensive rewrite of the Blue Book would be undertaken, and that each of these policies would be organized into a standardized format and then adopted as a chapter within the Blue Book. So what you are seeing before you is one of the standalone chapters, but there would be an overarching introductory statement that's intended to tie it all together. And and what we will do is allow the policies to each have individual supplemental tools and forms and helpful links, and also appendices to those policies that provide guidance. So that's
Commissioner Fielder?
and yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut off there.
Okay. This process allows the commission to consider individual policies one by one, but our goal is to get them all wrapped up into a package. So this one that's being drafted now or being considered now may undergo some formatting and structural changes and come back to you again when we're ready to adopt the overall Blue Book. And I'm hoping to get that done in February next month, to get that draft ready next month.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Mr. Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would note that with this particular policy, while any editorial and typographical errors are mine and mine alone, I would note that the substance was drafted by Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Rosequist on staff.
Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Rosequist, did you want to weigh in on this matter? They wave off. Additional discussion, commissioners? Commissioner Pinocci?
I think it's good to point out, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that one of the reasons we're here is the audit committee's brought up several concerns and saying, look, you guys got to fix this. You've got to do better. What assurance do we have? So we want to be able to go back to them and say, here are some changes we've made. I believe that some of the changes that need to be made are beyond Blue Book. I think that the system is so outdated. Travel has changed radically since they made the rules for the Public Service Commission. And Ben, I'll get with you later to talk to you about that. But I think we have to go beyond Blue Book policy changes, which I absolutely support. We do. But I think there are other changes that need to happen here to get updated that are beyond the Blue Book. So I'll get with you later today on that. But our goal here is to return to an audit committee with a Blue Book policy change to meet those concerns they brought to our attention. Thank you.
Vice Chair Johnson.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Johnson. Then I'll call on you, Commissioner.
Thank you,
Arnold.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reed, going back just real quickly to this whole transition to electronic signatures, is there a specific state level policy at this point regarding the use of electronic signature versus physical signature versus signature stamp? And if so, have we made sure that what we're doing here is compliant with what exists in at the state level?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, that's an excellent question. In the state of Montana, there's a law that is, if my memory serves me, called the Electronic Documents Act. And in a nutshell, it says that all electronic documents are the equivalent of any physical document. We are in fact in compliance with that state law.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to comment, not contradict, but to comment on Commissioner Pinocchi's comment that I believe that yourself as the incoming chairman and incoming Commissioner Fielder realized that the Blue Book needed to be thoroughly revised long before the audit came up. This was one of the very earliest initiatives of yourself, Mr. Chairman, and so this is housekeeping that needed to be done for a long time. Is very, very welcome. But I wanted to point out that the commission was embarked upon this process long before the audit occurred, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Fielder?
thank you. Given that this particular recommendation is coming through a committee process that I chair, what I'd like to do is ensure that the edits that are made to this document, that they would go through the committee chair, so that essentially I would have the opportunity to approve any changes to the edits before they are finalized.
I would say that's probably just ministerial in nature and doesn't impact our vote here today to adopt the delegation authority. So I don't see that as being a problem, Commissioner Fielder. Correct, Mr. Reed?
Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Additional discussion? Discussion, seeing none. All those in favor of Commissioner Fielder's motion to adopt a new policy in the Blue Book regarding authority delegated to staff, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Let's move to work session item number 3. This is docket 2021.04.047, Northwestern Energy. Northwestern Energy's application to increase the PCAM base. We're here to consider the parties' various motions for reconsideration. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. The staff memorandum sent out on this particular docket is brief, and it provides, I guess, all of the summary that I think that the commission needs in order to act on this. Sorry, is there an issue?
Please proceed.
Okay. So in a nutshell, you'll recall that this docket arose when Northwestern Energy filed an application to adjust its PCAM base. The Montana Consumer Council filed a motion to dismiss the application on the basis of representations and the commission's order from the original PCAM docket, the docket that set up the power costs and credits adjustments mechanism. The commission granted that motion to dismiss. The commission's final order was issued in December. Following the issuance of the final order, both Northwestern Energy and the Montana Consumer Council filed motions for reconsideration. It's important to note that neither party seeks to upend the commission's decision or otherwise reverse the ultimate outcome of the commission's decision. Rather, they take issue with some of the language used in the commission's final order that is not, so to speak, necessary for the ultimate disposition of the case. It would limit the precedential effect of the commission's final order. Upon reflection and upon analysis of the party's motions for reconsideration, staff's recommendation is to grant the motions for reconsideration, understanding that in the near future here, we do expect Northwestern Energy to come before the commission with a full general electric rate case. And as part of that rate case, they will be looking at the power cost and credit adjustments mechanism. So the mechanics of that particular tracker will be very much before the commission in short order. And so the precedential effect of this particular docket and the order on the motion to dismiss will be superseded by that ultimate decision in the general rate case. So with that, staff's recommendation is to grant motions for reconsideration. Mr. Chair, that can happen either as separate motions to approve each of the two motions for reconsideration, or as one combined motion, since staff's recommendation is to just approve or grant the motions as filed. The parties have done, I think, a very good job of specifying what language they would like to see stricken. So there's no ambiguity in just adopting their motions wholesale. I would also note that this may be an opportunity for the commission to revisit its two-step process for reconsideration, which is inherited from the Roberts Rules of Order. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I can talk more about the reasons why it would make sense to move to just a one-step process where the commission either grants in part or denies the party's motions for reconsideration, rather than having that parliamentary process of first opening reconsideration and then second deciding what to do with reconsideration. But at this point, I would stand for questions and I'd be happy to discuss that in greater detail.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, why don't we have him address the transition from two-step to one-step, just for the sake of that way, his responsibility.
Okay, so I don't know if you heard that, but the vice chair has requested that you address the two-step to one-step change.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman. So the two-step process, as I mentioned, is part of the Roberts Rules of Order, which are designed for parliamentary process. And there are many circumstances when this commission acts with parliamentary process. Indeed, most of these meetings are conducted through parliamentary process. So Robert's Rules of Order make a lot of sense for a lot of the things that the commission does. However, when we're in the middle of a contested case and the parties have filed motions for reconsideration, it's not necessary to use the parliamentary process. In fact, a judicial process makes more sense there. It's a better fit for the circumstance. And one example of how it's a better fit is that in this case, in this docket, we have two motions for reconsideration filed by the parties. Robert's rules would not allow a non-member of the parliamentary body to make a motion. So already it's a bad fit. There's also limitations on who can make a motion in Robert's Rules of Order and the timelines for making that motion, none of which really apply well to this circumstance where the parties have asked the commission to reconsider. So much like the commission would evaluate any other motion of substance filed by parties in a contested case, I would recommend that the commission treat it as a matter of judicial procedure, where you act on the motions as filed and you don't require any one commissioner to make that procedural step of opening reconsideration in the first place.
Well stated, Mr. Hamilton. Vice Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is so enlightening and so abundantly logical. It's got to be wrong as it fits within the scope of what we do. I'm sure there'll be a challenge to it, but I like it, and we're going to proceed on that basis, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you for that. And with assurances from legal, Mr. Chairman, that in fact we can address both of these motions for reconsideration in a single motion from Commissioner, I would move that we grant reconsideration as requested by both parties in this docket, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that motion. Discussion, Vice Chair Johnson.
Really not much, Mr. Chairman. I think legal staff has done a tremendous job of explaining why we probably ought to move in this this direction. It's just, I think out of an abundance of caution that we approach it this way, and I'm going to support my own motion. Thank you.
Makes perfect sense, Vice Chair Johnson. Additional discussion. Additional discussion either on the process or the motions for reconsideration. I'll address.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Commissioner Fielder, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm just a little bit confused because the staff memorandum or the worksheet on this, the cover sheet, states that the staff recommendation is to grant in part and deny in part, and that does not sound like the motion that's on the floor before us.
Excellent point, Commissioner Fielder. Mr. Hamilton, did you want to address that?
Certainly. Commissioner Fielder and members of the commission, the staff submitted that work session request form earlier in the week before we'd had a time to fully discuss and decide on an ultimate recommendation. So I would say that the recommendation outlined in the staff memo and as reflected in the vice chair's motion is an accurate reflection of the commission staff's recommendation here.
Commissioner Fielder.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That satisfies the confusion that I had on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question, Commissioner Fielder. Additional discussion? Now, let me address the procedural part of what we're doing here, where we're eschewing the two-step process for reconsideration. If you go back through the mists of time, back to January of 2021, when I came onto the commission, and the first time I was encountered as chairman with this two-step process, I was quite befuddled by it. And Vice Chair Johnson and I had a colloquy back in January 2021 about the procedural portion of this. And the reason I was befuddled by it is because it didn't make sense from a quasi-judicial perspective, as you have alluded to, Mr. Hamilton. As you were noting, the process that we have been previously using the Roberts Rules of Order didn't comport essentially with the judicial nature of these proceedings. And so I'm strongly supportive of just moving to this one-step process where the parties themselves ask for the reconsideration instead of essentially the commission doing it. So I think this is a good change. Let me address the merits of the motions for reconsideration. Let me state that I absolutely agree with MCC's motion for reconsideration and substance. We did create in our order a exception perhaps that we didn't need to do and was probably procedurally defective and probably raised some due process concerns. So I think on the merits, I'm strongly supporting MCC's motion for reconsideration. I'm on the fence on Northwestern Energy's motion for reconsideration. Really, I could go either way on this, but I would note that as staff has pointed out in its memo to the commission on this is that we'll be picking up the PCAM base adjustment here, I think, pretty early in 2022. So we'll have this substantive discussion all over again in the near future. And so I'm inclined to just agree with staff that we'll just address the motion for reconsideration and then rehash this out again at some future point. So I will be supporting the vice chair's motion. Additional discussion? Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the vice chair's motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. A couple of housekeeping matters here before we adjourn. Just remind the commissioners that we do have an informational meeting On ESG, 3:30 today, the agenda is not correct in its representation that that'll be occurring in the Bollinger Room. Rather, that will be virtual, I believe. Is that correct, Patricia? She's giving me the nod. So that will be a virtual presentation. And then I would note that the agenda is also wrong, that our next commission business meeting is not Tuesday, January 19th. In fact, it's Wednesday, January 19th, I believe, at 9:30 a.m. So we are going to move the date of the next commission meeting by one day from Tuesday's Wednesday. And the reason we're doing that is because we will be presenting at ETIC on the 18th. So with that being said, on the changes to the agenda and public notifications, I will adjourn this meeting, seeing no further business, and I will do the time, Commissioner O'Donnell, prior to hitting the gavel. It is 10:14 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.